Morning light filtered through the dusty windows of a rundown community center in Crown Heights as Maria Ellis stretched out her arms, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders. At 28, she had already poured 6 years of her life into Pulse of the Streets, a dance company she founded in her Brooklyn loft with two roommates, all driven by a single vision: to bring the raw power of urban movement, hip-hop freestyles, jazz funk flair, and capoeira-inspired flow into the mainstream. But today, like so many before it, began with the sting of rejection. Clutching her phone, Maria dialed the local cultural affairs office one more time. "We're sorry, Ms. Ellis," the voice on the other end said, "but we're fully booked for the next 6 months. You might try the Borough Hall Theater." She thanked them and hung up, the walls of the cramped rehearsal room seeming to close in. By midday, Maria and her three dancers, Jasmine, a lithe contemporary specialist, Malik, whose popping routines could silence any crowd, and Rosa, a relentless force of rhythmic isolation, loaded their duffel bags onto the back of an old borrowed van. Their destination, a small black-owned church basement in Bedford-Stuyvesant. The basement was no grand stage, just concrete floors and folding chairs, but it was free. They needed any space they could get. Arriving at the church, Maria greeted Pastor Davis with a weary smile. "Thank you for letting us use the hall," she said. Pastor Davis, a soft-spoken man in a worn suit, nodded. "Our doors are open," he replied gently. Inside, the dancers slipped off their sneakers and began running through choreography. Sharp isolations, swooping extensions, floor work that blended technique with grit. But without proper lighting, mirrors, or sprung floors, every landing jarred their joints, and every reflection in the unsteady folding mirrors distorted their form. That evening, Maria's laptop pinged with an email from a Manhattan theater. "Thank you for your inquiry. Unfortunately, we cannot accommodate your group at this time." No explanation, no encouragement, just the finality of another no. She pressed her palms to the screen, willing the words to change, but the emptiness remained. Back in her loft, Maria stared at a wall lined with posters she had designed herself. Vibrant silhouettes of dancers against graffiti-style backdrops. Each poster proclaimed dates for a performance that had no stage. She ran her fingers along the edge of one, recalling the day she and her roommates scraped together $200 to print 500 flyers. Every artist she knew, white, black, Latinx, had enthusiastically posted them on street poles and storefronts. Yet when it came time to secure a venue, the doors stayed firmly shut. She thought of the conversations she'd had with booking agents. "You don't have a proven track record," they'd say. "Our clientele expects a classical company." Or worse, the unspoken glance when they learned she was a young black woman leading her own troupe. Maria closed her eyes and sighed. The city that claimed to celebrate diversity had no room for the visceral stories they told with their bodies. Stories of subway car walls vibrating with bass, of late-night street corner ciphers, of joy and pain intertwined. Alone at her kitchen table, Maria opened a blank document and began to type, "Pulse of the Streets is more than a dance company. We are chronicle keepers of the city's heartbeat." She paused, hands hovering over the keys. This message, she knew, would have to be powerful enough to break through the prejudice that barred her from every reputable stage. With determination sharpening in her chest, Maria saved the draft. If the mainstream wouldn't give them a stage, she would find another way to make the city stand still and listen. After all, even closed doors could not contain the rhythm of her community. The late afternoon sun slanted through the high windows of Bedford-Stuyvesant's small church basement, casting long shafts of golden light across the scuffed concrete floor. Maria Ellis stood before a row of folding chairs and a makeshift bar, her reflection rippling in the warped mirror panels she'd taped together the night before. Around her, Jasmine, Malik, and Rosa stretched in pin-drop silence, each lost in their own mental rehearsal of the upcoming routine. Despite the energy pulsing through their veins, the space felt cavernous and lifeless. Beneath the fluorescent bulbs, some flickering, others dead, the dancers' shadows danced on the walls in eerie repetition. Maria beckoned them to form a circle. "All right," she began, her voice echoing softly. "We're going to run the first sequence from top to bottom. Focus on the phrasing. 8 counts of jazz funk, then transitioned directly into the street dance breakdown. They launched forward. Jasmine's arms sliced through the air with balletic grace. Malik's chest popped on every on-beat snap. Rosa's footwork thundered against the hard surface. Maria led from the center, her body a living metronome. But with no raised stage or sprung floor, every leap landed with a hollow thud, and every quick pivot risked a rolled ankle. The lack of proper lighting meant they couldn't see the precision of their lines, and without stage mirrors, they struggled to correct small misalignments. After the run-through, Maria called out corrections. Jasmine, lower your center on that second arabesque. Your back leg's too high and you're losing stability. Malik, watch your shoulder isolation. It's sharp, but the timing's off by half a beat. Rosa, great energy, but your weight's dropping forward. Keep your core locked. Her directions were precise, born of years in dance studios that had stocked sprung floors and professional rigs. The dancers nodded, breathing hard, and returned to their spots. Maria, whose passion burned brightest when she taught, demonstrated a correction. She slid into a low plie, then rose into a smooth hip-hop sway, emphasizing the nuanced shift of her ribcage. Her foot struck the floor with controlled force, but even she winced as the impact reverberated up her spine. As they picked up again, the door swung open. Pastor Davis peered in, concern creasing his brow. "I'm sorry, Maria," he said softly, "but the church trustees have asked us to clear the basement by 7 p.m. They've got a youth group event." Maria paused mid-move, heart sinking. 7? But we've barely had time to run it twice. She walked over and rested a hand on the dusty folding table. "Is there any chance we could stay later tonight?" The pastor shook his head regretfully. "They're strict about the schedule, you know how it is. I can't ask them again." Maria nodded, swallowing frustration. "Okay, we'll make the most of the time we have." The dancers exchanged glances, muscles trembling from exhaustion and disappointment. Maria drew in a steadying breath. "Let's do one final full run, with clean entrances and exits. Then, we'll call it." They reset. Silence fell, broken only by the distant hum of traffic from the street above. Then Maria counted off. 5, 6, 7, 8, and they moved as one. Sharp, synchronized, fierce. Each shift of weight told a story of city streets, alleyway ciphers, and late-night train platforms. When the last pose landed chest deep and grounded, they held it, still as statues. For a moment, the room held its breath alongside them. Then, Malik exhaled a triumphant laugh. "That was fire," he said, voice echoing. Jasmine cracked a grin despite her sweaty exhaustion. Rosa flexed her ankles, eyes bright. As they gathered their bags, Maria looked around the barren basement and allowed herself a small, fierce smile. The space might have been empty, but within those 4 walls, they had ignited something powerful, a living pulse that no door, no booking refusal could ever extinguish. Outside, the fading daylight welcomed them back into the city streets. Maria led her dancers up the concrete steps, each footfall a promise. They would find a stage worthy of their fire, even if it meant burning down barriers to get there. The Friday evening air was cool as Maria Ellis led Pulse of the Streets down the cracked stoop of the church basement. Their bones still vibrated from the final run-through. Their spirits flickered with the thrill of creation, but dimmed under the weight of perpetual rejection. As they loaded duffel bags into the back of the van, a sleek black car eased to a stop beside them. 3 figures stepped out: Luke Harris, Emily Stone, and Ryan Clark, names Maria recognized from glossy playbills and dance magazine features. Luke, tall and broad-shouldered, wore a leather jacket over a simple tee. Emily, with platinum hair pulled into a high bun, carried a clipboard. Ryan, lean and intense, shifted a camera bag on his shoulder. They approached with measured steps. "Maria Ellis," Luke called, voice warm but authoritative. He extended his hand. Maria hesitated for a heartbeat. Was this another courtesy call before an inevitable no? But she shook his hand firmly. "Yes." Emily tapped her clipboard. "We're choreographers with Pulse Collective," she said, glancing at Maria's troupe. "We saw your video on Contemporary Pulse Journal. The critic's piece about your basement rehearsals. We came by invitation of Mara Chen, the dance critic. Maria's breath caught. Mara Chen had been one of the few critics to write about Pulse of the Streets, not patronizingly, but with genuine excitement. Maria nodded slowly. You wanted to see us? Ryan stepped forward. We did. We drove past the church after reading Chen's piece. We watched through the window, your group moving with raw precision, narrative power, urgency. He paused, eyes earnest. Honestly, we've never felt compelled to intervene, until now. Luke added, we know Carnegie Hall's main stage requires credentials none of you have. But we think your work deserves that space. Emily spread her arms wide as if embracing the night sky. We want to help you get it. In stunned silence, Maria gestured inside. Come in, please. They stepped into the basement, the air thick with echoes of their own choreography. Jasmine, Malik, and Rosa exchanged astonished glances. Lucy, the church custodian, flicked on the remaining fluorescent lights, one still buzzing. Under its glow, Luke knelt to examine the scuffed floor. I can patch this, he said, voice laced with certainty. We'll bring in a portable sprung floor for you, borrowed from Pulse Collective's storage. Emily produced a schematic on her clipboard, a bird's-eye layout of Carnegie Hall's stern auditorium, stage dimensions, lighting grids, audience sightlines. This is what we need to negotiate with the administration, she explained. A special benefit performance, urban dance meets neoclassical program. All proceeds to your company. Ryan clicked open his laptop, revealing a sample marketing plan. Press releases, social media teasers, fundraising events. He looked up at Maria. We'll handle logistics, sound, lights, stagehands. You focus on your art. Maria felt her throat tighten. Why would you do this? She asked, voice thick with wonder. Luke met her gaze squarely. Because your choreography tells a story that matters. Our audiences need to see these rhythms, these histories. We believe in you. As the trio outlined next steps, drafting a proposal to Carnegie's director, rallying local sponsors, scheduling rehearsals, they ignited a spark of hope in Maria's chest. For the first time, Pulse of the Streets felt seen, not as an oddity, but as equals in the world of high art. That night, under flickering fluorescent light and folding chairs pushed to the walls, the 4 choreographers and 4 dancers huddled around Emily's clipboard. They sketched timelines, assigned roles, and rehearsed speeches. Every plan another brick in the path to Carnegie Hall. When the meeting broke, Maria stood in the doorway with Luke, Emily, and Ryan, watching her troupe depart for home. She inhaled deeply, tasting possibility. The city's pulse still throbbed in her veins. But now, with unlikely allies by her side, she resolved to make that heartbeat echo on the grandest stage of all. That Sunday afternoon, Maria Ellis unlocked the door to her 2-bedroom Brooklyn loft and flicked on the overhead lamp, its single bulb casting a warm glow over the eclectic melange of spray paint art, potted succulents, and yoga mats folded against the wall. She set down her tote, crammed with rehearsal notes and dance shoes, and greeted Luke Harris, Emily Stone, and Ryan Clark, who had already spread blueprints, laptops, and coffee cups across her small dining table. Welcome to base camp, Maria said with a wry smile, pulling up a folding chair. Around her, the air thrummed with anticipation and just a trace of nerves. They were about to attempt something nobody in their circle had ever dared. Commandeer Carnegie Hall's main stage for a debut performance by a scrappy, under-the-radar black dance company. Emily tapped her clipboard. First order of business, the logistics proposal, she announced. She tapped open a 2-page document titled Pulse of the Streets Benefit Performance. At the top, bolded in elegant serif font, requested venue, Stern Auditorium/Perlman Stage, Carnegie Hall. Beneath, itemized bullet points. Date and time. Saturday, October 13th, 8 p.m. Audience capacity, 2,804 seats. Program format, 2 40-minute sets. Intermission, gala finale budget estimate. Venue rental, staffing, technical support, marketing. Luke leaned in. Carnegie's rental fee for Stern Auditorium runs around $18,000 for a single evening, he explained. But if we position this as a charitable benefit, proceeds to support Pulse's community outreach programs, we can negotiate a reduced or waived fee. He underlined charitable benefit in red with a marker. Ryan scrolled through his laptop. We'll need a portable sprung floor, stagehands for load-in and strike, lighting cues programmed. Probably a 2-day tech rehearsal block. I've contacted our union leads. We can secure volunteers from Pulse Collective to assist, cutting labor costs by an estimated $5,000. He highlighted cost-saving figures in the spreadsheet. Maria studied the budget. $18,000 venue, $6,000 sprung floor rental, $4,000 audio lighting package, $3,000 staging labor, reduced to $1,500 with volunteers, plus marketing and ticketing fees. Total, roughly $35,000. She exhaled. We'll need to raise at least $40,000 to cover incidentals and ensure Pulse keeps any net proceeds. Emily pointed to the program outline. Artistic vision is crucial, she said. We open with Cityscape Suite, your street dance narrative, Maria, weaving hip-hop sequences with spoken word interludes. Then Emily and I will present a neoclassical duet, Reflections, that echoes your themes of resilience. Finally, a collaborative finale, Pulse Collide, featuring all 7 dancers in a fusion of urban and contemporary technique. Maria's heart fluttered. I want the lighting to shift in time with the beat. Warm amber for the city's heat, cool blue for introspective solos, then a full-spectrum wash for the finale. Luke sketched rough lighting diagrams on a legal pad. Front washes, side highlights, a single moving head on Maria's opening solo. Over the next 2 hours, they divided tasks. Luke would draft the formal venue request letter, highlighting Carnegie's mission to present the finest in the performing arts and framing Pulse as an embodiment of living urban culture. Emily would spearhead marketing, press releases to the New York Times, Dance Magazine, and local outlets, social media campaigns with teaser videos shot by Ryan, partnerships with community sponsors, Brooklyn Brewery, local arts councils. Ryan would coordinate technical needs, sourcing the sprung floor, scheduling tech rehearsal slots, mapping lighting cues and vector diagrams. Maria would refine choreography and assemble the dancer roster. She'd also draft a grant application to the Brooklyn Arts Council for $10,000 seed funding. As dusk settled outside, Maria looked around the cluttered table, at blueprints pinned to the wall and laptops humming, and felt a surge of gratitude. These white choreographers, Luke's industry connections, Emily's dramaturgical finesse, Ryan's production savvy, had not only offered help, but had become stewards of her vision. Closing her notebook, Maria tapped the final line of her draft grant proposal. Pulse of the Streets seeks to bring the unvarnished rhythms of urban life to the world's greatest stages. By partnering with Carnegie Hall, we will elevate our community's voice while democratizing access to high art venues. She pressed save. Outside the city's evening symphony, honking taxis, distant sirens, laughter drifting from sidewalk tables, rose in harmony. Inside that loft, 4 collaborators had forged a plan to transform exclusion into opportunity. The real rehearsal was just beginning. The marquee lights of Carnegie Hall's 57th Street entrance gleamed like beacons against the crisp October night. A gravelly line of well-dressed patrons, art aficionados, local dignitaries, and curious New Yorkers snaked down the steps. Maria Ellis stood backstage, heart pounding beneath the sleek lines of her custom black costume, layered mesh and leather panels that caught every spotlight. Above her, the vaulted ceiling of Stern Auditorium arched into darkness, a silent witness to countless historic performances. But tonight, it would bear witness to something entirely new. At precisely 7:45 p.m., the stagehands descended the heavy red velvet curtain. A single amber spotlight found Maria at center stage, her breath visible in the cool air. The sprung floor, meticulously installed by Luke's team, gave just enough give as Maria rose onto point and immediately dropped into the first sequence. A rapid-fire urban motif spun from hip-hop grooves. Her arms cut sharp angles through the haze of the moving headlights, tracing the geometry of the city skyline etched in shadows on the backdrop. Behind her, Jasmine, Malik, and Rosa emerged like silhouettes from an alleyway, their syncopated pop and lock steps punctuating the warm thrum of the original score composed by local DJ Camille. The audience exhaled as Malcolm's chest snapped to the beat, each click echoing in the cavernous hall. Emily Stone's neoclassical duet followed. Soft teal washes illuminated her and Luke in a lyrical pas de deux, their bodies weaving tensile lines of longing and uplift, a deliberate counterpoint to Pulse's gritty street aesthetic. Gasps rippled through the first rows at their gravity-defying lifts. Halfway through the first act, the lights dimmed and a brief intermission allowed the audience to murmur and stretch. In the lobby, the walls were lined with minimalist posters depicting stills from Cityscape Suite, capturing Maria's silhouette against graffiti-scrawled walls. Program booklets, designed by Ryan with a bold black and white motif, lay on tables, each listing sponsor acknowledgments and a heartfelt note from Maria. Tonight we bring our streets to this sacred stage to show that every corner of our city has a story worth telling. At 8:10 p.m. sharp, the second act began. The stage flooded with cobalt blue, a trio of percussive dancers, Chloe, Dante, and Ari, pounded the floor in a thunderous cipher, their stomps synced to live drumming from the pit. The pulse was primal, a direct conduit to the audience's own heartbeat. At their cue, Maria and her core company sprang back on stage, seamlessly merging the breakdance and circle tradition with contemporary lines taught by Emily. The result was electric. Elbow freezes transitioned into arabesque lunges, headspins morphed into delicate arabesque balances, defying every expectation. As the final tableau froze, 7 dancers fanned across the stage in inverted V formation. Silence held for a heartbeat before the house exploded into applause. Standing ovations swept across all 2,804 seats. Stiletto heels clicked on marble checking lines as critics leapt to their feet, hats flying off in congratulatory tosses. Maria, chest heaving, felt tears sting her eyes as she absorbed the roar. She bowed deeply, then raised her arms to include Emily, Luke, and Ryan, each stepping forward to accept the ovation alongside her. Backstage, the adrenaline didn't subside. Luke found Maria, draping a celebratory shawl over her shoulders. "You owned it," he said, voice thick with pride. Emily handed her a single red rose. For every obstacle we turned into opportunity, while Ryan thrust his camera into her hands, each photo already a keepsake. Malik and Jasmine enveloped her in a group hug. Rosa's laughter echoed off the concrete walls. In the lobby's press pit, reporters from the New York Times, the Village Voice, and Dance magazine jostled for quotes. A Times critic scribbled furiously, "A groundbreaking fusion of vernacular street dance and classical form, Pulse of the Streets has not only honored urban roots, but expanded the vocabulary of Carnegie Hall's storied repertoire." NPR's live mic caught Maria's voice trembling as she said, "This is for every artist who's ever been told they don't belong on this stage." Later, as the gala reception spilled into the grand foyer's gold-leafed corridors, community leaders and philanthropists toasted Pulse's success. A local council member whispered to Maria, "We'll fund your next season, any venue you choose." A famed Broadway producer approached Emily and Ryan, offering to collaborate on a national tour. Amidst crystal-clinking flutes of champagne, Maria realized they had done more than steal a night at Carnegie Hall. They had rewritten who gets to stand in its hallowed light. When she finally returned to her loft at dawn, exhaustion and triumph intertwined. She placed her single rose on the kitchen table, breathing in the quiet. The city beyond her window hummed with possibility. Pulse of the Streets had stolen Carnegie's spotlight, and in doing so, claimed it as their own. The doors that had once slammed in her face were now wide open, and Maria knew this was just the beginning. The morning after the Carnegie Hall premiere dawned with a flurry of headlines. Maria Ellis woke to the glow of her phone, which was already buzzing with notifications. Pulse of the Streets shatters, glass ceiling at Carnegie. The New York Times, hip-hop meets high art, NPR's morning edition number Pulse at Carnegie, trending across Instagram and Twitter. She lay still for a moment, letting the magnitude of it sink in. Then, bleary-eyed, she showered and headed into her loft's makeshift office, where Luke Harris was already hunched over his laptop, reading out invitations. They want us at Lincoln Center, he said, eyes shining. A special residency next spring. 10 performances in the David H. Koch Theater. He scrolled. And BAM has offered to host a community showcase at the Howard Gilman Opera House. Rosa and Malik tumbled out of the adjacent rehearsal room, still in sweats, drawn by the electric energy in the air. Jasmine followed, coffee in hand. Emily Stone arrived moments later, carrying printouts of Dance Magazine's feature story, Maria Ellis and the Pulse Revolution, complete with an 8-page photo spread. Maria grinned, voice trembling with disbelief. They actually broke their own rules for us. She tapped her finger on the Lincoln Center email. We have 2 weeks to confirm dates. We need to... Before she could finish, Ryan Clark burst in, waving his phone. Local arts councils are lining up to fund our next tour. The Brooklyn Arts Council just offered us a $15,000 grant for youth workshops. In that moment, the cramped loft felt too small for their triumph. They erected a folding table and gathered around, phones and laptops at the ready. Luke opened a new spreadsheet, Pulse Tour 2026, and began plotting venues, technical writers, and travel budgets. Emily sketched a marketing timeline on a whiteboard. Press tour, late night with Seth Meyers interview community rounds, free masterclasses in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queen's residency launch, Koch Theater opening gala, April 10th. As they worked through logistics, Maria paused. This is incredible, but we can't stop at big halls. We have to keep pushing access. She paced and looked each of them in the eye. Let's create a pipeline for other under-resourced choreographers. A Pulse incubator. Jasmine nodded, pulling out her notebook. We could host quarterly showcases at local arts centers. Invite emerging artists, pair them with mentors from Pulse Collective. Malik chimed in. And record each showcase. Put it online. Bring visibility to voices that still struggle to find stages. Rosa added, we should partner with the Department of Education. Bring dance into Title I schools. Within the hour, they had drafted program outlines, budget estimates, and partnership letters. Emily emailed Dance NYC about co-sponsorship. Ryan called the Union Hall to reserve portable sprung floors for community events. Luke drafted a mission statement. Pulse Incubator. Empowering emerging urban choreographers through mentorship, performance opportunities, and access to premier venues. That afternoon, they convened at Lincoln Center's administrative office. The familiar hush of the Koch Theater lobby, the gleam of marble floors, the hushed footsteps of patrons, all felt surreal. Maria met with the residency coordinator, who personally escorted her into the empty theater. Under the glow of the house lights, she traced the contour of the 2,700-seat auditorium with her eyes. We want to dedicate one performance each month to local youth ensembles, Maria explained. Teach them our repertoire, then give them 10 minutes on this stage. The coordinator nodded, already drafting an addendum to the residency contract. Back in the loft that evening, they toasted with sparkling cider. Outside, the city pulsed as always. Car horns, subway rumbles, laughter drifting on the wind. But inside, the team felt a new rhythm, one of possibility made manifest. Over the next few weeks, Pulse of the Streets appeared on community panels and in grant review meetings, advocating for equitable booking policies. Maria spoke at a Brooklyn Borough Hall forum alongside a city council member. Their joint resolution to reserve 20% of major venue calendars for emerging minority-led ensembles passed unanimously. By month's end, they had secured Lincoln Center residency dates, April-June 2026, confirmed BAM Community Showcase, January 2026, launched Pulse Incubator Pilot with 4 local choreographers, delivered masterclasses to over 300 Title I students. As autumn leaves drifted down 57th Street, Maria stood once more in front of Carnegie Hall, this time on the plaza rather than backstage. She watched families, tourists, and dance enthusiasts stream in for a scholarship performance, free tickets she'd helped distribute. A quartet of apprentices from the first incubator cohort greeted her with bows and smiles. In that moment, the barriers that had once seemed impenetrable lay shattered behind her. Pulse of the Streets had not only claimed Carnegie Hall's stage, they had opened its doors to a new generation. And as Maria lifted her head to the gilded marquee, she felt certain. The real revolution had only just begun. One crisp autumn evening, exactly 1 year after that historic benefit premiere, Maria Ellis stood backstage at Carnegie Hall's Stern Auditorium. This time, not as an outsider fighting for entry, but as an honored resident choreographer. The house lights glowed softly over rows of polished wood seats, now packed with an expectant audience. Patrons in evening wear, local art students clutching program booklets, and families who had received complimentary tickets through Pulse of the Streets community outreach. On stage, a banner unfurled above the proscenium arch in bold letters. Young Choreographers. Showcase, a Pulse Incubator Celebration. Below it, the theater's famed acoustics held the hum of eager anticipation. Maria inhaled deeply, her pulse steady as memories of last year's rejection and basement rehearsals coursed through her. She smiled and turned to greet her collaborators, Luke Harris in a crisp navy suit, Emily Stone in a sequined blazer, and Ryan Clark, whose camera already hung ready at his hip to document the night's debut. At 8:05 p.m., the house lights dimmed and a single spotlight illuminated the center stage. Maria stepped forward to address the audience. Welcome to the inaugural Young Choreographers Showcase. Tonight, we celebrate the next generation of urban dance visionaries. Artists who, like Pulse of the Streets once were, began with passion and no stage. Each of our 6 selected choreographers has spent the past 3 months in our Pulse incubator, refining their voices under the mentorship of today's leading dancers and choreographers. Let their stories inspire you as much as they have inspired us. Her words echoed through the auditorium, met with warm applause. As the lights shifted into a soft amber wash, the first emerging choreographer, Amina Johnson, an 18-year-old from the Bronx, took the stage. Amina's piece, Concrete Roots, blended Afro-beat rhythms with contemporary floorwork, tracing her family's journey from southern plantations to New York City tenements. With every ripple of her upper body and every grounded ply, the audience felt the weight and resilience of generations. Next was Carlos Ruiz, a charismatic dancer from Queens, whose work, Steel and Sky, fused flamenco footwork with breakdance freezes atop a custom steel grate platform. The percussive stomp of his heels reverberated through the stage, merging urban grit and classical poise in a visceral testament to hybrid identity. Between each performance, mentors took brief turns on stage. Emily Stone offered commentary on line and musicality. Luke Harris spoke about choreographic structure. Ryan Clark described the importance of documenting dance as cultural history. Their words underscored the collaborative spirit that had carried Pulse of the Streets from basement to main stage. The penultimate piece came from Emily Nguyen, whose duet, Echoes of Home, danced alongside longtime Pulse principal Jasmine Carter, wove traditional Vietnamese folk gestures into a contemporary dialogue on diaspora and belonging. When Jasmine lifted Emily in a seamless arabesque, their silhouettes cast dramatic shapes on the back curtain, eliciting a gentle gasp from the crowd. Finally, the grand finale. Pulse of the Streets returned en masse for Pulse Collide Redux, an expanded version of the piece that had first stunned Carnegie Hall a year prior. Maria led the company through a breathtaking fusion of hip-hop staccato, lyrical waves, and live DJ Camille's remix of city soundscapes. The Sprung Floor, by now a familiar partner, responded with perfect rebound to every leap and drop, while lighting cues danced in unison. Amber, cobalt, magenta, painting the dancers as living canvases. When the last note faded and the dancers froze in collective breath, a single sustained note of silence held the space in suspended wonder. Then the hall erupted in thunderous applause and a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Critics rose to their feet, stagehands paused in mid-task, and Maria felt tears slip freely down her cheeks. Backstage, Luke, Emily, and Ryan enveloped her in a group embrace. Maria squeezed their arms. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." In the lobby afterward, young choreographers congratulated their mentors. Patrons clamored for program booklets and autographs, and the Pulse Incubator sign-up sheet filled rapidly with names of hopeful artists determined to follow in Maria's footsteps. Carnegie Hall's director approached and offered a permanent, emerging artist spotlight slot for the coming seasons, an affirmation that walls once closed had now become doors flung wide. That night, as Maria finally stepped out onto the quiet 57th Street, the marquee's glow cast her long shadow onto the pavement. She looked back at Carnegie Hall, its stone facade etched in golden light. A year ago, that building had symbolized every barrier her company had faced. Tonight, it represented the power of allyship, tenacity, and artistry to rewrite those rules. With the pulse of the city humming around her, Maria turned toward home, her heart full, her vision clear, and her dance finally triumphant on the world's greatest stage.